We are now streaming. I was a little bit nervous about this because we have our Eagle Cam up now. No problems.
There's Robert.
Okay, you're ready to go whenever you're ready.
Seeing it's 6:05, I'd like to call the May 6, 2020 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order. And if you're able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the
To
flag
the flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States of America,
to the republic for which it
stands
one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
Councilmember Neckstead,
Here.
Councilmember Petty. Here. Vice Mayor Malloy,
Here.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Here.
Councilmember Navarre is here, he's muted, and Councilmember Glendenning.
Here.
Here, I didn't realize I wasn't on.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before agenda approval, Council, I'd like to draw your attention to a laydown that should have been transmitted to you earlier with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action and item D6, resolution number 2020-1, supplemental information memo requested by the city clerk. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested additions to the agenda packet listed by the mayor. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any unanimous consent was requested? Is there any objection? Being none, the consent agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Neckstead.
I move for approval of the consent agenda and I request unanimous consent.
Second.
Second.
Is there anybody on the body that would like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approval of the regular meeting minutes of April 15th, 2020, approval of the special meeting minutes of April 16th, 2020, and the work session summary of April 25th, 2020. We have approval of the bills to be ratified brought forth by administration. We have approval of purchase orders over 15,000 brought forth by administration. We have introduction of ordinance number 3120, accepting $26,595.90 in asset forfeiture sharing funds and appropriating those funds into the police machinery and equipment and small tools accounts for the purpose of purchasing law enforcement equipment brought forth by administration. Introduction and the public hearing on that one would be May 20th. Introduction of ordinance number 3121, 2020, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021. Amending the salary schedule in Kenai Municipal Code Chapter 2355 pay plan. and amending employee classifications in Kenai Municipal Code, Chapter 2350, brought forth by administration, and that public hearing would be May 20th. Introduction of ordinance number 3122-2020, accepting and appropriating a volunteer fire assistance grant from the United States Department of Agriculture, Forest Service, passed through the State of Alaska Division of Forestry for the purchase of forestry firefighting equipment, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on May 20th. Introduction of ordinance number 3124-2020, accepting and appropriating a Meals on Wheels COVID-19 response fund grant from Meals on Wheels America for Kenai Senior Center expenditures in support of COVID-19 pandemic response, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on May 20th. And introduction of ordinance number 3125-2020, accepting and appropriating additional nutrition, transportation, and support services grants funds from the United States Department of Health and Human Services, passed through the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services for Kenai Senior Center expenditures in support of COVID-19 pandemic response, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on May 20th. And that is your consent agenda.
Madam Clerk, is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda? Anybody out there, Jamie? Seeing none, we'll move to the unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? And hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We have no scheduled public comments this evening. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda or public comments? Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. Item D1, ordinance number 3117-2020, appropriating funds in the airport fund, accepting a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration, and appropriating funds in the Airport Equipment Capital Project Fund for the purchase of snow removal equipment, a loader with attachments. This is brought forward by administration. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to enact ordinance 3117-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3117-2020? Hearing none. Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I move to postpone ordinance 3117-2020 to our May 20th meeting.
Second.
Request unanimous consent.
Second, very good. Thank you, Councilmember Naxton. Is there any discussion on the motion for postponement to May 20? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that motion is approved. So that will be on our May 20th, 2020 agenda. Next up, we have item D2, ordinance number 3118-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $1,286.44 in the general fund, police department for state traffic grant overtime expenditures, forward by administration. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Glendening, did you raise your hand?
Move for the enactment.
There you go. Councilmember Navarre.
I move for the enactment of ordinance number 3118-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3118-2020? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Pleasure. Deliberation, comments from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
yes,
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
yes,
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendening.
yes,
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now on item D3, ordinance number 3119-2020, increasing general fund estimated revenues and appropriations by $26,542 in the general fund Parks, Recreation, and Beautification Department for an increase of a grant from the United States Environmental Protection Agency passed through the state of Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation for bacterial level monitoring on the city's beaches from March 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2020, brought forward by administration. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3119/2020.
Second.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3119-2020? I see Mr. Borneman there with another guest, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is Maggie Harms of the Kenai Watershed Forum.
Hello.
So we recently had another opportunity arise to monitor beach bacteria along the Kenai beaches this year. Currently, there's enough funding from DEC to fund sampling through, through their fiscal year 20, which would fund sampling through June 30th. Last year's sampling went really smoothly, and I did send out a white paper to all of you ahead of time. I hopefully we're able to review that, but we greatly value our relationship with the city and hope to continue some of the sampling this year. The way that we'd be able to conduct the sampling is through a simple amendment to the previous grant that funded the work conducted last year. So I guess with that, I'm happy to answer questions you guys may have.
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Petty.
I really do appreciate y'all bringing this forward to our attention. However, I do have some concerns about the negativity when there's negative bacterial reports that sheds negative light on our city. And I was just wondering if there was any way that y'all could help mitigate that, recognizing that there is a large gull colony, which causes a large bacterial count, along with warm water mammals that frequent the waters during that period of time. And so I was wondering if y'all had some sort of plan in regards to that, please.
Go, Megan.
Maggie.
It's Maggie, thanks.
Oh, Maggie, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so thanks for the question. So first and foremost, I will point out the fact that this will, and DEC is here, she'll speak after me, but this will very likely be the final summer of kind of this full-blown sampling that you've seen in the last several years. DEC is looking to move, I believe, toward a more of like a kind of a check system. And so the data collected this summer would essentially allow us to plug that data into a predictive model, which in the future would require far less sampling. So this is seen as a really positive outcome of all the sampling we've conducted in previous years. So to answer your question, there are several things that, between the city and DEC that are done every summer to kind of try to keep the folks of the city at ease. There are several emails that go out to shareholders explaining the results. There are quite a few outreach events conducted. I believe our Stream Watch program did some of that in prior years. One of the most positive things that has actually come out of this is that a lot of the fishermen are now aware of ways in which they can safely clean their fish, care for their fish. And we view that as a really positive outcome of this sampling. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate
Any other questions of Maggie? I see, Jim, are you raising your hand? Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, just to follow up on Councilman Member Petty's question. Yeah, I think what we're referring to is we had a improvident occurrence where maybe we found out about something potentially negative in the newspaper. And I know you're going to have general notifications, and you're going to provide a weekly dates to stakeholders. But I thought we had a special relationship that if something needed a heads up, the city manager would be contacted, and he could share thoughts with the process. Is that still the understanding?
Megan?
Hi, this is Sarah Absons with DEC. Yeah, last year, so it was my first year working with this project, but we, when we did our weekly notices, initially it was a little rough, but we've gotten it to where we've emailed the city manager and the project manager before we even did the public listservs or the public notifications for stakeholders. And this year we're planning on continuing that relationship. Because as Maggie said, the relationship between the city, the Watershed Forum, and DEC is, we see it as super valuable, not only in the context of this project, but also in the context of continuing to protect our beaches and protect the public's health.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Councilmember Nexton.
Still following in the same vein of questions, I just want to ask if there's going to be any press releases on the beach, on the television, to the public, or is that going to be controlled in a weekly document that is provided to our city manager first?
Okay, Brandon, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can try to take this one, and then Sarah can fill in where I'm missing. So good question, Mr. Naxted, appreciate it. So our solution to kind of the press release pandemonium, if you will, was last year to, instead of release, so the DEC is obligated to alert the public when we have an exceedance. And so that obligation in years prior resulted in them sending out a press release every time we had an exceedance sample that came back to us from the lab. So instead of constantly sending out those press releases or sending multiple press releases out through the summer, one of the solutions was to essentially just let the warning sit out there for the entire summer. So it was released, I think, upon the first exceedance, and then it just stayed with the recommendation that you clean your fish and you behave and you act in an appropriate manner in this fishery, and this bacteria is not that harmful to you. So, as Sarah said and might say again, we did coordinate the kind of the writing of that press release, or at least its release with Paul last year. There is certain language that DEC, is bound by law to essentially put in those press releases. So I'll stop there and see if Sarah can add anything that I missed.
There's Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah. If you want to.
Hi. Yeah, so Brandon did a great job. Last year we moved to doing a single press release at the beginning of the recreational season, or when we saw the first exceedance of state water quality standards. And that was to avoid kind of like that panicked confusion of people seeing, this very formal looking letter come out whenever there was an exceedance. So this year we're going to follow the model that we put into place last year of having a general notice at the beginning of the recreational season. I have that drafted so I could send it to interested parties after this. But basically it says that, DEC is going to be monitoring the beaches. We have a gull rookery. We have a lot of biological activity that results in sometimes high bacteria levels. we're monitoring this, and that this year we're going to have a interactive mapping tool on our beach webpage. So if people are interested, they can go on the beach webpage, see a map. It has little color-coded spots. So green is that, this week's sample came in under standards. And if it's red, then that means we have an exceedance. And on the website, it has tips and hints on how the public can keep themselves, safe while they're out recreating. And a lot of these recommendations are very similar to a lot of other public health messages of, when you're done fishing and before you go eat that free hot dog on the beach, to wash your hands, and then to rinse your fish in clean water, and to also, pick up after your trash, or pick up your trash, because that attracts more birds. So it's and use dumpsters and provided outhouse facilities. So that's we also revamped our communication plan this year, and we're trying to focus more on those, like, as far as our outreach message, like Brandon was saying that, these are all the bacteria we have here are natural sources. And we can't change the number of birds in the Kenai environment, but we can encourage people to do things like pick up their trash. And then we can also encourage people to protect themselves when bacteria levels are high by just washing their hands and being a little bit more careful, maybe not to go swimming when, there's a ton of people out, there's tons of it's hot, tons of people, lots of fish, you see people doing it, but we're trying to encourage people not to do it. So so we'll have a general notice at the beginning of the season, letting people know that if they want to be informed, they can check out the webpage. In addition to we're not doing the stakeholder email this year, but we're doing a listserv for interested parties. So, like Fish and Game, some local health officials who are interested, anybody who's really interested in getting those weekly update notices that we did last year can sign up and get them. And then we also have a protocol in place too if we're contacted by the media, so radio, or if a reporter was interested, we have a set outline of what to do. So
Okay, so, and just to be clear, this grant funding is for testing through June 30. And then
yes,
there's an additional grant that we would expect to do for the second half of the season.
yes, the second half will be July 1st and run sometime, I think, through early August. And we just don't have that funding right now, but so we couldn't put these two together, but there will be a second one to finish out the season.
Okay, I just says more for the public or anybody that might be listening, I think. So let's see, Vice Mayor Malloy has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I want to thank, Ms. Aston and the representatives from Watershed Forum for the dialogue and discussion today. Very helpful, and appreciate, what you've done to mitigate communication incidents from the previous, and I think you've got a good thing going there. Also want to thank you for the frequently asked questions from your webpage, and it was very informative to me. I'm glad that you have that available to the public, and it does reiterate, the message that you gave us, that it says DSC's key message to the public is to reduce attractions to birds by properly disposing of fish waste and picking trash up off the beach, which is something that we've always supported, and I appreciate that message being out there. And, I think the bird rookery is a blessing. It's like the 5th largest one in the world. So I wouldn't want to see us doing anything, to affirmatively reduce the number of birds. And I like that. It also, you talk about dogs and ungulate, which maybe I'm guessing is seals. not knowing the scientific term, but I know there's a lot of seals in the river too, and we see them regularly, and we're blessed with that. The other thing I wanted to note is that, there was according to the facts page, and I didn't know this, there was a previous program in Anchor Point and one in Homer. So it's not like, we're a target. I mean, we do have a big rookery, and we have a lot of people down here fishing, so I get it, I also like that there's an active program in Ketchikan, Alaska. I appreciate that you're doing this. I like that, you're going to move to a modeling program, next year and everything. So I do support this, and I appreciate the dialogue, and you, to my satisfaction, you've answered the questions of my colleagues, which I think were good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Sarah, Brandon, or Maggie? Seeing none, I would thank you for your testimony this evening, and agreed with the positive direction that this is going. I think we've improved some of the best management practices down there that has led to less likelihood, I guess, of higher bacteria levels. So certainly it's a safety concern, a health safety concern for the community and for the visitors. So getting out ahead of it is certainly helpful so that we don't have incidences that would plague us down the road, I think. So thanks, appreciate it. With that, is there anybody else that would like to speak to ordinance number 3122-2020? Or I'm sorry, 3119-2020. Henry?
Yeah, thank you. No problem. I'm going to be supporting this, and I'll likely be supporting it in July also. But as we've learned from previous years, that there's been, I think, 20 years of data. So there's a lot of information there. And my 60 years living on the Kenai River, no one ever would think to clean a fish in the water down there until a lot of unknowing folks started coming down for dip netting that weren't familiar or whatever. So I'm just going to pass on a general opinion is that the best thing really is, it's good to know what the numbers are, and I get that for the numbers, but I think one of the best things now and ongoing is education for folks. If you go onto a trail anywhere in the state, there's going to be a big board there that this is a brown bear, this is a black bear, and this is what you should do and how to avoid them and what signs to look for and all of that. It's kind of before you leave, stuff to do, not to litter and to pick up and so forth. And hopefully, if next year there's still some money from DEC available, that money will continue to go for public education on how to properly handle fish and clean them and where to do it and so forth. And I hope that becomes the big point with DEC in the future, not only in the Kenai drainage, but in where there's other fisheries where there's a lot of people coming to visit. I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay. Any other comments or deliberation on this ordinance? Seeing none, Councilmember Petty, are you good?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, just as a sort of general comment, I don't know what was going on last night, but the gulls in front of my place, they were going crazy for some reason, up and down. There was seemed like every gull in the rookery was flying over the house there. So I don't know what the heck. I don't know if you saw that, Henry, where you were at.
I saw here today, actually, there was probably 1,000 of them going up close to the shore. They're picking something up.
Yeah, rolling around. So seeing no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're now on item D4, ordinance number 3123-2020. And we do have a little bit of a different sequence here with this. So if you'd follow on your agenda, that would be great. Ordinance number 3123-2020, accepting and appropriating funds in the airport fund and accepting a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration for CARES Act grant brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. We got a motion for introduction, please. Councilmember Naxted.
Yeah, I move for introduction of ordinance 3123-2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion for introduction? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Yes.
My bad.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Can I get a motion for second reading, please? Councilmember Naxted.
I move for a second reading of ordinance 3123-2020.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion for second reading? Seeing none, clerk, please. Oh, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yeah, just briefly, for anybody on YouTube, the reason for doing this is because the grant has to be, done before May 20th and we don't meet again. So it's like an emergency basis. Thank you.
Yeah, and it'll be the same. Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. And we'll have the same situation on the next ordinance on the agenda.
And I move for unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested for the motion for a second reading. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion is approved. So now we have ordinance number 3123-2020, accepting and appropriating funds in the airport fund and accepting a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration for CARES Act grant afforded by administration. Councilmember Naxted.
I move for the adoption of ordinance 3123-2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3123-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilmember Naxted.
This CARES Act that's going to our airport appears to be a no strings attached, in that but so long as it goes toward normal airport operations. I was wondering if Mr. Ostrander might have anything more to add, or if that's the whole of it.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. So you're right. This is no strings attached, in that any expense of the airport is eligible. This money can be spent on any eligible expense. So yeah, there's no strings, unlike some of the other CARES Act money for this. And the intent here is to use this $1.6 million for operational costs of the airport.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on ordinance number 3123-2020? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll. You're muted, Jamie.
Sorry. Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're now on ordinance number 3126-2020, accepting and appropriating federal CARES Act funding passed through the state of Alaska for expenditures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, waiving the $5,000 limitation in KMP 7.25.020A on these funds to allow the city manager to allocate the funds to the proper account as needs arise and declaring an emergency. brought forward by administration. So I'm looking for a motion to introduce, or a motion for introduction. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to introduce ordinance number 3126, 2020.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to introduce? None. Is there anybody from the public, general public, that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3126-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Knoxtet,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, can I have a motion for a second reading? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move for second reading on ordinance number 3126, 2020.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, that motion is approved. We now have ordinance number 3126-2020, accepting and appropriating federal CARES Act funding passed through the state of Alaska for expenditures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, waiving the $5,000 limitation in KMC 7.25.020A on these funds to allow the city manager to allocate the funds to the proper account as needs arise and declaring an emergency forward by administration. There's a motion for adoption, please.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 3126, 2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3126-2020? Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. So this is on the floor for approval, council. Any discussion, comments, deliberation? Councilmember Naxton.
I asked the question of the city manager on the last one because I knew the answer. It's really the same question for this ordinance. I'm just trying to figure out what the money can be spent for and when can we expect it, and perhaps when we expect the state to have the meeting to actually dispense it.
Mr. Oster.
Everything else.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxton. So this funding, unlike the funding for the airport, does have strings attached to it. There has been two separate instances of federal guidance that has been provided by the Treasury Department, one on April 22nd and one yesterday. Based on that guidance, the expenditures do need to be related to unanticipated COVID expenses. So the intent for this money is exactly that, and that these are expenses that we didn't anticipate when we originally passed the budget. And the money here will be for things that are very clearly related to COVID. For example, we've been in the process of installing the plexiglass shields on public-facing desks. We purchased some thermometers that we can use for taking folks' temperatures. There's PPE that we're likely going to need to buy that we wouldn't have otherwise. So those types of expenses that clearly would qualify under this CARES Act funding are the types that we would be making with this money. And hopefully that answers your question.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thanks, Mayor. Paul, this is going to be a lot of money for us, and based on some of the, I think everybody's getting the emails that Jamie's forwarding on from AML, which should give people a lot of information, you know, of where everything's at this point. But are you anticipating having, you know, there'll be some issues, I think, that you'll be able to use the funding for, maybe for putting safety issues in and around our community, such as hand washing or whatever, upgrading, certain things. Are you anticipating coming back to us on those kind of suggestions, or can you move ahead with them? I'm good either way. I'm not asking it in a negative way. I'm just, I would just like us to be proactive in what's allowed and being able to utilize the funds before they expire in December, because I'm not so sure they'll be an extension, but maybe.
This is it.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Navarre. So as you said, this is a portion of the larger grant amount, which preliminarily is approximately 7.6 million. The large utilization of those funds is going to have to be a lengthy discussion with council as far as how you'd like us to best utilize those funds. This is a very small portion of it, and it's really just about the immediate response. These small purchases are things that we have to make right now that there just wasn't money budgeted for. So this gives us some flexibility with a small amount of this, but the larger amount, it really, I'm going to want to ask council to put a work session together so we can discuss that. And the reason why we haven't done that so far is because there's still so much uncertainty surrounding this money. And I'll talk about it in some more detail later, but with the legislature right now trying to decide whether or not they want to distribute the funds as the governor has indicated, and there seems to be some conflict there. And also the guidance from Treasury and from OMB at the state level, I think needs to be much clearer before we have that bigger discussion with council. So this money is just a small amount that helps us make some purchases that we need to make right now in responding to this that are directly related to unanticipated expenses with COVID.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Naxted, did you have a follow-up? I'm sorry, I kind of jumped over you.
Oh, that's fine. I appreciate hearing the rest of that. And actually, part of my questions were answered. I guess the other question I have is the 7.6 million. Backing up, I believe the Congress and the President, the original CARES Act went to each of the states based on population of those states. So that's what our state got, was that piece of the pie based on population. And our 7.6 million, I'm not sure what everybody else is getting anywhere, but is that part of the formula, Paul? Based on population of municipalities, is this congruent? Do we know what the formula is?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, we don't know what the formula is. We know what part of it is. They use the Community Assistance Program formula for a portion of the 568 million that's going to municipalities. But the other part that's considered a direct cost component, that formula, we don't know what it is. There's a rumor out there that we're going to know very soon what it is. And we have some indications of what it was based on. My understanding, and again, we don't have the formula in front of us, but it's basically a measure of the tax base of a municipality. Some correlation with that. The larger the tax base, the more money they get. There's got to be more to it, though, because when you look at some of the discrepancies between some of the boroughs and the municipalities out there, there's more to that formula than just that. But as of right now, we don't know what it is. Hopefully, there will be clarity at some point. I know that is one of the hesitations on the part of the legislature, is that there are certain legislators who are uncomfortable with the way that the money was allocated under that direct cost provision.
I appreciate that. I guess maybe I'm not involved in that end of it, but my concerns ultimately are that we get enough our share of the money, but I'm concerned that without knowing what the formula is, and they get to this point that there's going to be, and maybe it's a legal, bogged down in some kind of a legal issue between municipalities and the state when you're dealing with this kind of money. But I guess we'll just expect the state to do the most appropriate and best job.
May
Yes,
I-
Earl Stringer.
So through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, so although we're not privy to the exact formula that was used, we do know the allocated amounts. So those have been set. So if the legislature approves this funding to municipality as proposed by the governor, those amounts will be set. So at that point, there won't be the ability for municipalities to fight against each other, I guess, to try to get more money, because by approval, they're basically approving not only the money itself being sent to municipalities, but they're approving the amounts.
Yeah, and just so you know, Councilman said, Paul and I had a conversation about this shortly after they released the allocated amounts, and I think there's concerns from other municipalities besides us about maybe how they derive those allocation figures. So, and I think they also, like Paul mentioned, they base on to some degree supposedly on tax revenue, but on the other hand, they exempted the inclusion of oil and gas property, so property tax. So I thought that was interesting. So I agree. I think there's other folks, and I'm sure it's going to be deliberated at a higher level before it gets dispersed. So I do have a question though, Paul, as far as time. I know you're starting to track, or you've been tracking our employee time for COVID. So can they be used to reimburse the times of our employees that is used for COVID, even non-overtime?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So the latest guidance did provide some clarity on that. So what they've said now is that for public safety employees, so that includes police, fire, and dispatch for the city, that 100% of their payroll costs can be covered by the CARES Act. The guidance also indicates that for employees who their time is substantially spent on COVID-related items, that their payroll costs will be covered as well. So we know that our police, fire, and dispatch since March 1 of 2020, that the costs will be covered. And there will be a handful of other folks within the city that their payroll costs will also be covered. Likely the members of our incident management team, their payroll costs will be covered. And there might be a couple of other employees within some departments whose payroll costs are covered. So as far as other employees, if you work an hour or two on COVID-related items straight time, at this point, it does not appear that those costs will be eligible for reimbursement through the CARES Act.
Thanks, Paul. Any other deliberations, comments, questions? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Nextet,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you, Council. We're now on resolution number 2020-21, which is just a simple move for approval for the rest of these. So authorizing a budget transfer in the general fund city clerk department for software add-on brought forward by the city clerk. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Navarre.
Move for the approval of resolution number 2020-21.
Second.
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-21? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Seeing none. Resolution number 2020.
Thank you for your memo. Jim.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Dan.
Thank you.
2020-21 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-22, authorizing the city of Kenai to issue grant obligation refunding bonds in the principal amount of not to exceed the sum of $1,250,000 to refund certain outstanding general obligation bonds of the city, fixing certain details of such bonds and authorizing their sale or by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of resolution 2020-22.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-22? And just for the, I know we discussed in our budget work session, Mr. Eubank, but could you give a brief overview so folks on YouTube might understand what we're doing here?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So about 10 years, it'll be 10 years ago this fall, the city issued touch over $2 million in general obligation bonds to fund the expansion of the Kenai Community Library. Those bonds were 20-year bonds. They had both a traditional non-taxable component and also a taxable component as far as the debt that was issued. To date, we've retired all of the non-taxable portion of those bonds. What's outstanding now is some taxable bonds for which the city receives an interest subsidy from the federal government. Those remaining bonds are callable at 10 years, so we can extinguish that debt if we choose to. We were approached by the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank to basically, in essence, refinance the remaining 10 years of the debt, not to extend the term of the debt. It still will remain at 10 years, but it will lower the effective interest rate of that debt, saving the city an estimated $84,000 approximately over the next 10 years, with a net present value savings of about $75,000. So basically what we'll be doing is issuing new bonds. The proceeds from those bonds needed to retire that debt in, I believe, October, November of this year when it or the call date. That money will be placed in an escrow account, and when those bonds are callable, that escrow will pay off those bonds, and we'll be left with the new bonds to retire over the next 10 years.
Thank you. Very good. And just this extend the term of the bond. It's refinance for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I understood your question. So this does not extend the length of the bonds. It still remains just 10 years. It just is effectively lowering the interest rate.
Very good. Thank you. Any other discussion on resolution number 2020-22? Councilmember Navarre.
Thanks, Mayor. Terry, I don't think it will, but, we are going to have to go out for either revenue bonds if we tie the bluff erosion to sales tax or something, or just go and there's a $2 million bond that we already have an approval for. Now, none of that gets affected our bond rate by what we're doing or anything, right?
Mr. Eubank.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarre, through the mayor. No, I don't believe so. If anything, I believe our position would be strengthened because the annual debt service that we'll have to make in the future will be reduced, which in theory would expand our capacity for other debt.
Thanks.
Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-22? Was unanimous consent requested?
We're requesting unanimous consent.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-22 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-23, approving an exception to the collections policy for the delinquent ambulance to eliminate out-of-pocket collection for COVID treatment transport to comply with federal funding requirements brought forward by the Department. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Moved to adopt resolution number 2020-23.
Second.
We cast unanimous consent.
Okay, is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-23? Hearing none, bring back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Councilmember Naxton.
No objection at all. I do have a question for Mr. Bloom on this. First off, I'm going to support it, of course, but I was curious for the ambulance transport. Is it waived for those patients that have it, or just think they may, or is it clear? So I imagine there's people that get a cough and they think they may have it, and they call an ambulance to go to Soldotna, and then they turn out to have something else. And I was wondering if that would be considered to be a free ambulance ride because it was connected, because they said so.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. I don't think that we are transferring people that just say that they have a cough. We've implemented processes to sort of reduce the transfers. And I actually think to date, we haven't had a single COVID transfer. But I think if it was COVID related, if they had COVID symptoms, coughs, and we ended up transferring them, again, it's not a free ride. We could still bill insurance. We just wouldn't get any out-of-pocket expenses from the patients.
Any other comments, deliberation? I don't have any objection. I just wanted to point out, I just happened to catch this here, is under, it's just a Scribner's error, Jamie, under section 1, item 1, the last sentence there where it says the demand shall include so on and so forth. It says patent instead of patient, I think is what it should be.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We'll take care of that.
Okay, very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-23 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-24, selecting the successful firm for the professional environmental/civil engineering and construction administration services for Kenai Municipal Water, Sewer, and Wastewater capital improvement projects requested for proposals. This is brought forward by administration. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of resolution 2020-24.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-24? Hearing or seeing none, we'll bring it back to the body. Deliberation, comments.
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxton. Yes, requested. Is there any objection? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I would just hope for a little more fulsome explanation of how we got to this point. Is there a difference in how this contract is to be applied? Is it exclusive, or can we entertain other entities to work with us in the engineering world?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. I did ask Mr. Curtin to join us tonight in case there were questions I couldn't answer. I'll take a shot at that, and if I don't answer it sufficiently, he can help you out. So this contract is virtually identical to the contract the council just approved for engineering services at the airport. What this does is it enters a contract with HDL for a term contract. So over the term of the contract, the 3-year contract, if we have a project that needs engineering at the wastewater treatment plant, we can negotiate with them to do that work. That being said, at any time, if we decide that we want to go out to RFP for a specific project, and put it back out on the street, we can do that. So there's no minimum amount of work guaranteed here. They're not guaranteed any contracts at all, but what it does allow us to do, gives us authority to negotiate with HDL for projects at the wastewater treatment plant without going back out onto the street, which is typically what our procurement code would require.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think that's a positive, forward-leaning approach, and it's innovative. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Thank you, Mr. Curtin, for being on standby there. Appreciate it. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number. Lost my spot here. Resolution number 2020-24 is adopted. And that brings us to G8. Discussion election method, and this is something that I asked to be that it be put on the agenda. I think most of you are aware that the borough assembly is considering a vote by mail switch, and I thought it was appropriate for us to start the discussion. It was on their agenda last night for introduction, and I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Hines to give everybody an overview of sort of what this would mean to the city moving forward and how we would react to that. So Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the feasibility study that was presented to the Borough Assembly yesterday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Dennis Wheeler from Resource Data presented to the Assembly and went over his feasibility study. He said that a by mail process is feasible for the Kenai Peninsula Borough and that it is feasible for the 2020 election. He discussed challenges with poll-based elections. He showed statistics for increased voter turnout compared to vote by mail. For example, in statewide general elections in Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, they show 70 to 80% voter turnout. Because that's a statewide general election, he also showed us municipality of Anchorage data from pre-vote by mail. They would have 23 to 26% voter turnout, 23 being in a non-mayoral election and 26 being in a mayoral election. And post-vote by mail, they have 30 to 36%, 30 being in a non-mayoral election and 36 being during a mayoral election. And he also showed data that showed that our registered voter data is becoming just a little bit skewed from the PFDs. We're registering people now based on application for PFD, and those people may not have typically registered to vote in the past. And so Anchorage's voter rolls increased by 2,000 last year, yet their population actually dropped. So that's also playing into our numbers. He also went over CDC guidelines based on this pandemic. One thing that we're always talking about with elections is sustainability in disasters or events or other events, and a pandemic is one of them. The CDC guidelines currently are encouraging absentee methods. And if you have to have a poll-based, then frequent sanitizing. And then also we are aware that we need to hire 150 to 190% of what you need to show up, because people are just not showing up for work. The only thing that they had to require for a by mail election style is frequent hand washing. He also went over some benefits. He noted that benefits of vote by mail is that it maximizes voter confidence. in their choices, that voters are more prone to completely vote a ballot. And then he discussed, and he also discussed that from here on, he discussed this stuff in his feasibility study report that I emailed to you, that the municipality of Anchorage was willing to let the Kenai Peninsula Borough borrow their equipment for the 2020 election. You can read these on the last 2 or 3 pages, that vote by mail is actually cheaper per voter by approximately $2.31 in a Kenai Peninsula Borough election. He identified that in 2019, the cost per Kenai Peninsula Borough voter was $10.72. And he indicated that that could actually decrease, I think based on it being similar costs once you get through the initial purchase of equipment and increased voter turnout. He discussed both in the meeting and in this report the need to identify undeliverables, meaning voters in their voter registration have provided a mailing address where the mail is not deliverable for whatever reason. When the state gets that information back, they have a status code where they'll put UN in the status code on the voter rolls. And so then you would make a policy change to indicate that you don't mail a ballot to those addresses. And also, in addition to looking at the status code in the voter rolls, you would send out a postcard in advance. And if you were to receive any of those back, you send that information to the state so they can update their rolls. And also, so you're not mailing a bunch of stuff that's just gonna, is gonna come back. He discussed campaigns to increase signatures on file with the Division of Elections. When you go to a vote by mail style, you're verifying voter registrations based on signature verification. And he mentioned sending voter registers to the state so that they can scan signatures on registers from previous poll-based elections, so that you know that you have plenty on file, so you're not having to have a voter cure you're not having to have every voter cure their unfound signature. He discussed the processing of a returned ballot in both the meeting and in this study. He discussed using GIS mapping for the Kenai Peninsula Borough service areas for ballot style determination. And he discussed envelope requirements and costs. And then again, pages 34 to 36 discusses the Kenai Peninsula Borough costs. And if the city were to choose to also go to vote by mail, we would intend to vote or to go into a memorandum of agreement with the borough for sharing costs where you can, which is a current practice with the borough. We just don't have a formalized MOA on file. I am currently reviewing or drafting an ordinance to match our code to what the borough's ordinance that was introduced indicates. It'll be ready for the May 20th meeting for introduction. We will definitely need to have a work session involved with that. And it is proposing a repeal and replace, because much of our election code is in one section of code, and a lot of it speaks to Alaska Statute 15. And since they're potentially staying poll-based, we need to follow the borough, which is going by mail. And so it'll split it up this way and also go to the by mail. Let's see, removing references to precinct based and adding details specific to vinyl highway. And I just also wanted to point out that moving to by mail was recommended by the election stakeholder group, which met for approximately a year last year, 8 months, I believe, last year. And is one of their guiding principles was to ensure that we are providing the best option at the best value to the voter, but also a conciliation agreement they have for ADA complaint, which they are the ones that have the complaint, but we also have that same ADA issue in that we don't have an ADA accessible way for people to vote. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk more about anything in specific. You're muted.
I'm not.
All right, let's try that.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned about a work session. When would you like to see that scheduled?
We would introduce it on May 20th, and so I could put a item on the May 20th agenda to set a work session, or if you guys wanted to set one now, we could do that.
Okay, I was just wondering about the time moving forward.
Oh, thank you for reminding me, Mayor Gabriel. It will be introduced on in theory, it would be introduced on May 20th. It would be up for public hearing for the Kenai Peninsula Borough, it'll be June 2nd. So our public hearing, I believe, would be June 3rd. And then we are able to postpone it to one next meeting date, which would be June 17th. But because of our 30-day requirement, I need for it to be adopted by June 17th in order to have it effective in time for me to do this. So we're on a pretty tight timeline, but we do have the option for holding 2 public hearings and a work session between introduction and adoption.
Very good. I know you're working on drafting code revisions to accommodate this. I guess one of the questions that, since the borough, they handle our elections, if the borough decides to enact their ordinance for the vote by mail, do we have an opt-out? I mean, are we able to opt out? I mean, how
We are able.
Could.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We are able to opt out. It would mean that we wouldn't be able to take advantage of a lot of the cost sharing that we currently do with the borough, and we would be paying for our elections ourselves.
Okay, just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
It would also potentially create a little bit of voter confusion because, in Anchorage, their vote by mail and the general election's in November. And so when you're having the same election on the same day, yet having you have to go to the polling place for one ballot and have another ballot mailed to you, it could create a little bit of a lot of voter confusion.
Gotcha. Well, one of the other questions I had is we've sort of got this concurrent timeline with the borough with their ordinance. There was I did briefly read their ordinance, and I know there's things that they're requiring as far as on the ballot sleeve was an identifier plus their signature, and I think the feasibility study had talked about the cost of a flap to a privacy flap on the sleeve. So I guess where I was going with this, if they amend their code, before we're going to be making last minute changes to our ordinance based on what they do on their ordinance.
We will potentially have to make some last minute changes on ours based on what they decide to do on some of the technical stuff, because we're talking about, so that ballots don't get lost, we're talking about having our ballots all mailed in the same package, and then have essentially 2 packages within one. So they have a borough package and the city package in the one bigger package, and then they'll have to vote the cities, and it'll all be color coded so that they can be distributed appropriately, and there'll be holes in envelopes so that we can see the color of the ballot. And we have ideas here, but
Okay.
but as far as those types of things, so that we can match and are doing it the same and aren't violating our code, because that's the way that the borough ended up. Those are the policy decisions that the borough made. We would need to make some.
Yeah, I mean, because moving forward, I can definitely see the possibility of maybe an amendment to their ordinance, and just was wondering how that would affect ours. So I'll open the rest of the body here. Do you guys have any questions, comments, or you want to? I'll see Councilmember Peterkin's raised his hand, and I'll go to Glenn Denning after that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I, as you know, you and I served on the committee at the borough, and I came into that. I think Johnny wanted me to be on that committee because I was adamantly against mail voting. And
I actually recommended you as the devil's advocate. But.
Yeah, well, I went in very much against it, and going through the process, I actually, as we went through step by step, and whether it was flooding in Seward or a pandemic in Alaska or what it was, everything pointed to this, and it makes good sense. I mean, it changed my mind, and that doesn't often happen. So there's also a lot of details we don't need to go into, but I mean, the borough borrows the state's voting machine, and the state's voting machine is outdated, and there's a whole host of problems here that we probably really need to be following the borough, because we share a lot of similar county things. And anyway, I just had offered to Jamie, since I was involved in it, to sponsor the resolution whenever it gets prepared, and I'm glad to, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Glenn Denning.
Yes, question for Jamie. We're not required to be ADA compliant with the machines until the end of December of this year. Is that correct?
The signs.
That's what I got out of I listened in on the meeting too. That's what I got out of the testimony.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glenn Denning, that would be the borough. The borough is the one that's working on that complaint. It's at any time somebody could file a complaint against us, and we would be in the same situation. So,
right, but we tag along with them on it. So if they do it, we would probably have to do it too, correct? If they go ADA compliant, of course we would. Is
sure. So when that 88 complaint came down, the complaint was actually against the city of Homer and the Kenai Peninsula Borough. And so in order to cure the complaint, the city of Homer purchased touchscreen units to put in their precincts. And the Kenai Peninsula Borough was unable to purchase the 30 units that they needed to put into theirs. And so this conciliation agreement was their way to work through curing the complaint. So the city isn't yet involved. We do need to have an ADA way for people to vote, and we know that what we are currently using is not acceptable, and so it would just be a matter of time if we did not follow suit and or purchase our own equipment.
Okay, and then just one more.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Glenn Denning.
I will actually have two more, but in our budget document, it stated we're going to collaborate with the residents of the city to decide on a new election method and develop new election processes suitable for the needs of the city of Kenai concurrently with the Kenai Peninsula Borough. In our rush to judgment, how is this going to be accomplished? How do we get the citizens involved, especially with our social distancing and all of these pitfalls that we have in front of us?
Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. The meetings, even though they're via Zoom, are advertised exactly the same way as every other meeting. We would hold a work session and the public is welcome to submit public comments by email, but they're also welcome to join these Zoom meetings. I've provided both links through so they can join virtually, and there's also telephone numbers that they can call in, which has been happening a little bit. So we would be publicly noticing all of these decisions in the way that we always do and asking for them to make comments.
Did you have a
Okay.
follow-up, Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, just one more. Lots of questions, but this one, I'm looking here. I'm on screen with the packet. I was aware of the outline and the topics, and then of course I received the rest of the packet in the mail. But there's a lot of hoops we have to jump through to get ready for vote by mail. We have to update our administrative rules. We have to acquire a mail sorter solution, prepare the election site. This could be do away with our precincts. I don't know. Develop an automated method for assigning ballot styles, and then the collect initial set of reference signatures. And I don't know if we can get all of this done. Do we have means of having our poll workers trained in recognizing and collaborating and verifying signatures from something on file to something that is received in mail?
Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. The administrative rules is what I'm drafting right now as far as the ordinance, which will be before you by May 20th. Having the mail sorter in place, I haven't spoken with Johnny and to know if she has one picked out that she's planning to purchase, but I do know that the municipality of Anchorage has offered theirs if she's unable to get one in place this year, if that's the software is what there was another point that you made and my head said software and I don't remember what it was.
I'll get back to you.
I think that might have been referring to the signatures.
Oh, well, yeah, that's part of it too.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the signatures get scanned. We have the poll books from, and so
Yeah,
does the
I was just talking about individuals trained in verifying signatures. There has to be a standard for that, right?
Right. So there's two options for signature verification. The first one is to get have your sorter verify signatures, and you can set it to all of it, set it to 90%, and any signature that's 90% accurate gets automatically approved. And then everything that's less than 90% accurate needs human eyes, and this Washington municipality of Anchorage hires them every year, but the Washington State Patrol, which is essentially the same as the state troopers, come train them in signature verification as part of their mission. And so we can do a combination of using software and sorter or training and having eyes on the signatures.
Okay, and then just one more. I found this interesting. You have GIS placement of voters, geocoding. Out in the borough, there's service groups. I don't know if we'd be challenged with that, but that is something we would have to fold into our system also. And we currently have a technician helping us with our GIS. Is that in our view to be adapted for servicing our vote by mail?
Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning, in the past several years, we've not had any sort of ballot. It's been an area-wide for the city ballot. So every city resident, every city voter would get the same ballot, and we wouldn't need to do that type of thing unless in the adoption of an ordinance or a resolution that you were putting a proposition before voters, you divided a section out of town somehow. That would be the only time we would need it. And at that point, we would work with the borough.
Okay, and then just getting back to the collaborate with the residents of the city of Kenai. Obviously, with this expedited timetable, there would be no time to put it on the ballot for approval by the citizens of the town. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the roadmap trajectory of this vote by mail? Councilmember Petty?
Yes, for the viewing members outside of our looking at here, the people out in radio land or internet land, the question about how susceptible is this to fraud? Because I know that's a huge concern. Can you address that and help me have a greater understanding so that people who might also have that question could be reassured, please?
Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Petty. It's actually funny you asked that because I just enlightened somebody in a very long Facebook post. Vote by mail ballots are mailed to registered voters, and when they are returned, we verify that registered voter signed that, and they're signing an oath that they swear that they did that ballot. It's very similar to an absentee by mail or absentee person coming into my office before election day. Early voters fill out an envelope and they swear that they're who they say they are and that they're voting this ballot. That signature is verified against their signature in the database so that we can know that that signature belongs to that person. The return envelopes are coded, so we know that this code belongs to this voter. And so it goes through the sorter, and we know that we mailed this ballot out. It belongs in this particular election, and it is a voter in such and such precinct, and it needs to have whatever ballot style. It goes on for signature verification. This is Anchorage's process. One person looks at it, they verify the signature. It goes to another person. They have software that ensures that it goes to two different people. The signature is verified by a second person. Once it passes through both of those signature verifiers, it gets into the approved file. The top is torn off of the ballot, of the envelope. They have a very specific process in doing this. You have three election workers here. One is peeling the ballot, which is inside of a secrecy sleeve outside of the envelope, so that you can't see the way that the voter voted their ballot. They pass it on to the next worker. That worker, now we have an envelope over here, and a worker over here is pulling the ballot out of the secrecy sleeve and opening it up and passing it on and making sure that it gets straightened out. And then it's put into a scanner where we're scanning the ballots and adjudicating the ballots. So if it's determined that, okay, so for example, where you have multiple voters in a single household, if so-and-so votes the other person in the household's ballot, Anchorage has actually been able to determine that and cure that ballot for them. Because this serial number belongs with this voter, and the spouse signed in that line, their signatures aren't going to match, and so they are able to find the other ballot or not, and call the voter and say, did you intend to vote your spouse's ballot? And no, I didn't. And so did your spouse also vote a ballot? Yes, they did. Okay. And then they find it and then they cross them. They are able to cure it in that type of a situation. As far as if we can't cure a ballot, it's not going to get counted. The vote by mail process allows for a curing situation. Right now, if somebody votes absentee, if they forget to sign the envelope, if we can't read or they don't provide us with an identifier, or if the voter official or a witness does not also sign the envelope, those ballots don't get counted. And so in a vote by mail situation, we have another opportunity to cure all of that if we receive the ballot in time before those ballots are counted. I hope that I helped there.
Did that answer your question, Ms. Petty?
I'm sure that some of my neighbors out there will have concerns about this process because it's different, and they've heard a lot of news about the possibility of voter fraud through the mail-in election. And what is the timetable? So if, let's say, November 1st is the election day, and is your ballot valid if you have a postmark by that day and it doesn't arrive in the mail until November the 8th? Does their ballot still get to be recognized as a valid if they have the correct postmark, or how does that work? Or are these questions that are too detailed that I should wait for the work session?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think we've got sort of a pretty good overview. I know exactly what you're talking about, Ms. Petty. There's or Councilmember Petty. There's issues with ballot harvesting. I think they've had issues in several places, and but even I know I had my reservations and concerns about it. I'm still a little bit concerned. I don't know how their ordinance might be amended from where it's at now. So that could be a concern for me, but even voting twice, because they will have vote centers open that you can still go vote in person if you like to. So if there's the thought, well, if somebody mails one in and then goes and votes in person, so there are safety nets there too. But I think for now, if everybody's okay with where we're at, we can save a lot of this.
I got to explain just one thing to a couple of phone calls. If I could get the question answered, that'll get it off my neck. Who pays for the mailing of the document? Does the voter, or does the municipality, or the borough?
Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. The borough will be paying for it. However, we would be splitting the cost. We would be paying our share. And the ordinance, even currently as written, in our current code, the city pays all the expenses of an election, so of a city election. So we would be reimbursing the borough for our share.
Thank you. I'll have a happy constituent.
Is there, Councilmember Naxton?
Yeah, just one quick question. I was wondering, we're talking code. Is there anything in the charter that we have to get through, or is that pretty much silent on how we vote?
A Mr. Bloom question? Or
No.
I'm not sure.
that's fine.
Thank you, Gabriel. Councilmember Naxet. Our charter is definitely not silent. We have
Well, yeah.
we have 8, I think there's 8 or 10 pieces of Article 10 that speak to elections. Very much a lot of our elections is in charter, but none of it deals with how we vote as far as vote by mail or precinct based. So we will not need a charter amendment.
Good question, Councilmember Naxted. Thanks for bringing that forward. Is everybody okay with where we're at now? And then we'll, I'm sure, get more enlightened on the work session. I would recommend that folks maybe, go online and if they've got questions and there are other vote by mail areas and states that are doing this right now. So might be a good time to sort of get educated on it before the work session. So with that, we'll move to discussion city response to COVID-19 requested by administration. Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So an update on COVID-19 preparations here at the city from the last council meeting to now. So as of today, and actually this was last week this occurred, we brought all employees back to the city with the exception of 4 14-hour employees who are furloughed. And we also have 2 employees that continue to telework because they are in that more vulnerable population. The positions that are primarily public facing, we've assigned all of them specific projects. One of the important things to me was making sure that they're being productive when we bring them home or bring them back to work. So the fact that they are primarily public facing, generally interact with the public, that's their job. We had to find them some specific projects they could do, and we have for all of those employees. The ability to continue that is limited, however. At some point, we will work through all these projects. So we are certainly hoping we get back closer to normal. And I think the governor's press briefing tonight indicates that we are headed that direction. We have been working on determining how we need or what we need to do as far as changes are to the personal use fishery. I have talked to Commissioner Vincent Lang and talked to him about the fishery, and he's very much intending to still hold the fishery. I've reached out to Commissioner Crum and exchanged emails with him about getting some direction from his department on specific protections or specific things we should put into place for a safety measure for the fishery, such as if participants should be required to wear some type of PPE, or if there are certain things that we need to do with our bathroom facilities, that sort of thing. So Department of Health and Social Services is going to help guide us through that rather than us trying to make those determinations on what we need to do to make sure we can safely execute this fishery. They're going to help provide guidance there. We are looking at reopening City Hall at some point in the relative near future. You know, there hasn't been a lot or frankly any people that have been asking or wanting City Hall to reopen. We're also, of course, talking about the visitor center and the rec center as well, and trying to determine when it makes sense to open those facilities. So the focus really since April 22nd, the primary focus has been on utilization of the CARES Act funding. And we talked about some of that earlier. I will go through what I was going to talk about. Some of it might duplicate a little bit of what I said earlier, but I'll go through it anyways. So additional guidance, again, the first guidance from Treasury came out on April 22nd. We did receive additional guidance in the form of Q&A yesterday. It's very clear now, Treasury's been very consistent on this, that revenue replacement is not something that's going to be allowed for payment through the CARES Act. But like I said earlier, payroll expenses for public safety, so fire, police, and dispatch, we're going to 100% of those costs are going to be payable through the CARES Act. Plus those employees such as myself, Mr. Eubank, Jamie, Mr. Bloom, the members of the IMT and others within the city that have substantially dedicated time to COVID. The way we interpret this guidance now is that their payroll expenses will also be covered at 100%. So we're going to identify those folks, and that'll be a significant amount of payroll expense that will be able to cover through the CARES Act. There are a couple things that as well that we can do under the CARES Act that's very clear. One is emergency financial assistance to individuals that were impacted by loss of revenue because of COVID-19. So that's another potential use of the CARES Act funding. Another one is financial assistance to businesses that have been required to close under government mandate. So if a mandate that was issued by the governor said that you had to close as a business, we can use CARES Act funding that's given to the city to provide funding for those businesses. Another possibility is capital projects that mitigate impacts of COVID-19. I may have mentioned previously, one of the things that we're looking at is turning all of the bathrooms in all of our public buildings into touchless bathrooms. Our buildings folks have gone through all the buildings today. I should be getting a list of the number of fixtures that would be to replace all of those within the city. Also turning all of our water fountains into water bottle fillers instead. So that's the type of capital project that we're confident is eligible for CARES Act funding. Like I said earlier, I want to make sure that we have really a lot of clarity on this and know exactly how much money is going to be coming to the city before I request that council sets up a work session and we just can discuss the most appropriate way to use these funds. I think we're still a little ways out. I think we will get a lot of clarity, hopefully by the next council meeting on the 20th. So I'm anticipating a work session sometime after the 20th, potentially before June. So the governor did submit his plan for these funds. So the $568 million in direct municipal relief, he submitted it to the Legislative Budget and Audit, or LB&A, 2 weeks ago now. But LB&A is currently not willing to consider the revised program legislative, which is the program that the governor asked them increase these funds. So RPL is what it's called. The governor requested that the legislature approve this through the RPL process. LB&A right now is not willing to consider using that. So that $568.6 million is now in limbo to a certain extent. LB&A was supposed to hear today. They postponed that till Monday. Now, apparently, the Senate is unwilling to reconvene in Juneau, and the House is willing to reconvene in Juneau. So we're in this limbo right now. House leadership is meeting tomorrow, and that could shake things loose. We don't know, but things are changing daily. There are a lot of municipalities that are in the same boat we're at. There's just so much uncertainty right now. Really hoping that the legislature can move forward on this and provide that clarity that we need. But once clarity is provided and we get additional guidance from Treasury and potentially the state OMB, that's when I'm going to ask council to schedule a work session so that we can discuss utilization of those funds. And that's all I have for now, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We have any questions of Mr. Ostrander in regards to the COVID-19 city response? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, we had shut down construction activities out in our airport area. When are we going to get that up and running, and when will the projects be finished?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. That actually did restart about 2.5 weeks ago. The airport is essentially done. There's some items, some final items that they needed. What are they called? Punch list items that still need to be done at the airport. But the siding is, for all intents and purposes, done. There might be a very small amount of siding that's left. So those punch list items. The other part is the boiler that we had talked about potentially getting replaced under this grant. That design has now been given to Blasey, and we're waiting on a quote for that. So that's one other additional part of the project that might start And then in addition to that, the furniture part is still under design. So the furniture and the boilers are really the two big things potentially left. The rest of it, we're down to punch list items on the airport.
Thank you. Any other, Councilmember Glendinning?
Yes, yeah, I did see some electricians working out there, and I'm glad to see here that the backside of the terminal's getting weathered in. The projects over at Beacon, are those completed?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendinning. I believe they are, they're down to punch list items as well. There's one change order that there's some conflict over that I know needs to be resolved, but I'm pretty sure we're down to just punch list items on that one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the city manager regarding city response to COVID-19? Seeing none, thank you, Paul, for that overview. The next is Commission Committee Reports, Council on Aging.
Yes, the next meeting is scheduled for, is it the 14th, Jamie, of May?
Yes, it is. And we are meeting by Zoom.
Zooming, okay.
Very good. Airport Commission.
I believe their next meeting is May the 14th also.
Thank you. Harbor Commission.
Our next meeting is May 11th, and I haven't heard anything, so I don't really know if we're meeting or not.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Parks and Recreation Commission is meeting by Zoom tomorrow. And they haven't met since early March, so I'm going to try to make my report shorter than their meeting. There's lots been happened since then.
Yes.
I hate to be the one that runs the meeting longer, than the actual discussion.
Yeah. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Planning and Zoning's next scheduled meeting is the 13th of May.
Thank you. Beautification Committee.
Yes, Beautification will be meeting on May the 12th via Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Mini Grant Steering Committee. There is no report, but I would like to say that I'm glad to see we're starting to spool up our committee commissions on Zoom, and sort of the new norm right now. So, we sort of have to soldier on, and glad to see we're working in that direction. Under report of the mayor, I don't really have, there's really not been a lot going on, as far as city functions or, chamber luncheons, and I mean, all sorts of things that I would probably normally report on. But I would like to ask administration to reach out to Greg Veit with the American Legion and see where we're at. I haven't heard anything regarding Veterans Day, or it's Memorial Day services, and I don't know where they're at. I think it might be, appropriate to find some way to honor our fallen soldiers. So, maybe they're open to ideas, and maybe we could work towards something. I think it's, regardless of this COVID, it's a different enemy. We seem to be at war, only with a different type of enemy right now. But anyway, with that, I'll, hopefully I will say that I'm fairly happy with the, I am happy with the way that our administration is handling COVID, but I think where I was going with that is more our folks of our community, our cases haven't ramped up, but again, we still need to, be diligent and, spread, the word on remaining diligent, at least, for the foreseeable future, because the last thing we want to do is get people complacent and, and having a spike or more contagion down in our city. So with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager, Mr. Ostrander. Oh, Councilmember Peterkin, sorry.
Yeah, I just had a question, and Paul might be able to help with this. I noticed the Anchorage City Council was meeting in person, and I was just curious if you had any time that you planned when we'd be meeting in person. I know there's 95 people, I guess, right now infected in our state out of 750,000. So is it got to go to zero or what?
Well, do you want to respond to that, Mr. Ostrander? I have my own thoughts, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Peterkin. It's council's decision on that one, following the governor's mandate. So if council determines that you want to meet in person, I'm sure Jamie can make sure that we can do it and still provide the social distancing necessary. So it's really a council decision on the way that you prefer or would like to meet based on the governor's mandates.
Yeah, I was going to say it is up to us. We would, probably have to rearrange the council chambers. It might be a little bit more even awkward than what we're doing now, because we still have to have, public participation. I think they want to still be able to, see us even on video or what we're doing. I definitely hear you, Councilmember Peterkin. It's very frustrating for me also. I'd much rather meet in person, and I'd like to go possibly a couple more meetings here and then just see where we're at from there. I know that they're talking about, I listened to Representative Tuck was on Sound Off this morning and talking about reconvening the legislature, and they're talking about would be, moving the House out of their chambers and moving the Senate. Senate has half the members the House have, so they might be able to use the House chambers to conduct their business, and then the House would have to meet in a gymnasium or something like that with social distancing. But yeah, it's definitely extremely frustrating. But with the governor opening up things, I think it's prudent for us to maybe see how those go, and then see where the trend is there before we jump in person. So I guess I'll pass that around to the rest of the body. I see Councilmember next. I might have a comment.
Yeah, I just, regarding that and perhaps everything else, I would hope that every agenda from here for a while has a discussion item, as this one, the COVID-19. And that would be it might be at our next meeting we want to discuss, because that'll be 2 weeks from now, if things have changed. If we want to try to come back 2 weeks after that for somewhat of a regular meeting, or if we want to hold off. So I think having this discussion item in our agenda kind of keeps it in the forefront, and that'd be part of the discussion.
And we just have to be cognizant of our more vulnerable Jim Glendenning members, so as we move forward. I worry about you, Jim.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor, I've provided for that. I left my iPad and my will to Henry, so no worries.
Okay.
But I'm ready to get back in regular order. And when we went to this type of format, we identified how we would do it, and it's time.
I'm anxious too, and I think as Henry pointed out, having a discussion item and roundtabling that next meeting, making a decision as a body. It's not my decision. I think it's a decision of the entire body, what makes us feel comfortable. So, and I think also with the inclusion of additional comments from our staff members who need to be there to help facilitate the meeting. So definitely worth discussing. So yeah, Jamie, if we can just make sure it's on the next agenda for discussion. Okay. With that, we'll move to the city manager report, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I wanted to give the council an idea of some of the groups that I'm talking to consistently. There's an enormous amount of meetings now between a lot of different groups as people are navigating through COVID-19. I'm in a group of coastal road communities, representatives from those coastal road communities and Department of Health and Social Services. I'm also on a local leader fishing industry group that meets to talk about the seafood processing and commercial fishing industry and how those businesses ramping up are going to potentially impact those communities. I'm on weekly meetings with the Alaska Municipal Managers Association, and those are meetings with all municipal managers all across the state. I had my second meeting with Soldotna and also Fish and Game and Parks and Kenai National Wildlife Refuge, all talking about what state campgrounds look like, what the facilities, the launches, their cabins, and how those things are playing out and what they're looking to do to accommodate folks this summer. I finally got onto the sport and personal use group that has been meeting, the COVID-19 response group. I had my first meeting with them yesterday, I believe. And that's a group that was formed by Kenai River Sport Fish Association, and it's primarily made up of sport fish and personal use fishing advocates from around the state. I did testify to the House Finance Committee about CARES Act funding on the 30th of April. I believe that was last Friday. They asked, I think there were 6 of us on there that testified, just talking about the necessity of the funding and what really we needed it for. And consistently across the board, every community out there, every governmental entity is saying that revenue replacement is the most important thing that communities need. An update on the bike path along Bridge Access Road. So I have continued to work with DOT on that. And I think council knows the latest estimate that they provided me on that is for a total project cost of $2.4 million, which requires a match of $216,000 locally. DOT is saying that they have to manage that project. And I was planning on working with the legislature this last session to try to get them to convince DOT that that should be managed locally. Not only are we going to be maintaining this for the long term, but this is essentially going to be out of DOT's hands. So there's really no reason for them to manage the project. What I'm trying to get DOT to do now is to have them hold on to the money and keep it obligated to us long enough where I can work with the legislature to try to get that management decision reversed. On the Buff project, I'm pursuing 2 items currently. Once we got approval from the Corps to move ahead with the PED, so I'm pursuing what's called a Section 221, which is in-kind work that the city will be doing. It's to the tune of $100,000 worth of work, and it's surveying both topography and hydrography of the area. So that's something that we would actually contract out ourselves and get that work done, and it would provide $100,000 of in-kind credit towards the project. And the second one is the actual PED agreement, which is the larger agreement that allows the design of the project to go forward. I expect approval on both 221 and on the PED agreement in June, likely late June. They told me June 20th to 22nd for the 2 of them. As we know, things tend to get delayed, so I'm hoping we'll get approval in late June for both of those. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Councilmember Peter Ken.
Yeah, I have 2 questions on the bike path, Paul. Can you, I don't know if there's a way to do this, but can you ask them if we can provide in-kind gravel for our 216 grand?
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Peterkin, I will ask him. I have not asked if it can be in kind. That's never come up, but I'll ask them if we can provide in kind.
Okay. And one more. Any word on our DipNet fee legislation with Peter Chicky?
Sure.
Mr. Chicky.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Peterkin, no word. It died along with a lot of other bills when essentially they were in such a hurry to get out of there because of the COVID pandemic, and really they focused primarily on the budget. So I would anticipate that it will come up again during their next session. So there's nothing that will be in place for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll go to city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I don't have any comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got any.
Any questions of the city attorney? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, our major air carrier went bankrupt as a result of this COVID business. Is there, I don't know if this is in your purview or not, but is there a replacement airline coming in? I know with interest that they're going to put all their stuff up for sale. And do we have any hope in that respect?
So, I have been in contact with their bankruptcy attorneys, and their attorney tells me that their plan is not to liquidate, that they had to file the motion to liquidate based on a demand from their creditors, but that they still hope to reemerge in one way, shape, or form or another. We did send them a new airline operating agreement that would extend their terminal lease space beyond, I believe it's July 1st of this year, though I'm not sure that we would actually I think there'd be some discussion as to whether we want to continue to do business with them. As an organization, the city, Mary, Paul, Terry, and I have all been actively trying to reach out to other airline operators, including Alaska Air, to see if we can get a good operator in place. There are some challenges that we face with that based on the fact that we currently don't have security, so we have to have planes that have a certain passenger capacity. But we're working on it. I'm monitoring the bankruptcy as much as I can, and I've been talking to their bankruptcy attorneys at least once a week.
Thank you.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. And Mr. Bloom, what do you mean we don't have security? Like physical security, or?
We currently don't have TSA in place. So if it's a plane, I can't remember if it's over 65 passengers or something, you have to have TSA in place.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, we'll move to city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, council members. So as we discussed in the committee and commissions reports, they've all been prepped for their May meeting. They're all meeting and they've all been given instructions on how to Zoom. They've all indicated that they have the capabilities of either calling in or attending virtually like this. And the clerk's office staff will be attending each of the meetings in order to offer technical support to the chair of those meetings. And then back to election stuff, there's a couple stuff that came to my mind after I finished. Back to the conversation about making sure the public is aware that this is happening. The Kenai Peninsula Borough, the city of Soldotna, and the city of Kenai for sure are all putting forth ordinances moving to vote by mail. And I believe the city of Homer and the city of Seward are as well. And I feel pretty sure that the news will be picking it up and bringing it out and bringing it to the forefront for the residents. And then I also blew past back to voter fraud. The voter registration is run by the state, and because it's run at the state level and not a county or city level or borough or city level, we can ensure that there's only a person is only registered to vote in one location in the state. And then also the state participates in the Electronic Registration Information Consortium. And we participate. There's a total of 30 states and Washington, D.C. that participate in that. And they all work together to ensure that voters are only registered one time. So I hope that goes a little bit farther to answering the questions regarding voter fraud. Voter fraud is a really big topic, and it's difficult to know which piece of elections people mean when they talk about voter fraud. And then I just wanted to really encourage people to read this study. It's 44 pages and it's probably pretty dry, but it does have a lot of really good information in it, and he separated it out really well to make a lot of sense. Another little piece that I blew over was that all of the vote centers and the sorter and the scanning and adjudication systems, they're all air gapped, which means that they're not connected to each other and they're not connected to the internet. So there's no way for hacking. And then I also blew over the fact that we're including vote centers, which means that if somebody wanted to come and vote in person, they are certainly able to. So that is all I have. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Jamie, I know Dennis Wheeler during that presentation, I think it was Tuesday, he actually, yesterday, they had a PowerPoint that he was going to send to Johnny. Were they going to post that to their website or have, excuse me, make it available?
They will. I will make sure that we get a copy and I will forward that on to you.
Very good, because I think there was some additional information on that PowerPoint that would help some folks. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, Jamie, the committee that was established over at the borough for looking at how we changed our voting means and methods, I believe, well, I attended some meetings, it was last summer or something like that. The conclusions that were made, the report, is that available in an email? Could you send me a copy of that, please?
I will.
Vice Mayor Boyd.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I was also wondering if the feasibility study, if you have that as a PDF file, if you could email that too, it would just save some time searching. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we'll move to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time? Not seeing or hearing anybody, so that will move us to council comments. I'll go around the horn on my screen here. Councilmember Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, just thanks to Paul and crew for helping guide us through this this COVID experience. The economic devastation to our town is going to be massive, and we won't really realize it for some time here. But I know you're aware of that, and we'll take all the means we can to make sure that we have a successful economy. But just getting back to the elections, changing our means and method, and I'd thought about this and maybe had conversation with other people about it. Is that elections are the foundational utility of our democracy, and we have to be really, really careful how we manage and display our intent. And most of all, the people must have confidence in the process. So anything we can do to elicit public response and reach out to even those who maybe don't have the ability to Zoom. I think we'll have a more successful process. And with that, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, both work sessions actually, because I agree with what my colleague, Councilmember Glendenning, said about the importance of voting and everything, and ensuring that, and also the one on what our flexibility may be with respect to CARES Act funding. Because on social media we've received comments about, well, this is being done here to help stimulate the community and everything, and it was good to be able to point to things that we've done and refer people to the coronavirus resource information that we have on our website and the mayor's letter and things like that. But so it'll be good to know that there is going to be some money that we may be able to do for local stimulus for businesses that were mandated to close, or else that were substantially impacted, like we know a lot of our businesses were. And so I'm looking forward to what we may be able to do with some of that funds locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarre.
Yeah, everybody, thanks. The meeting worked again today. I'm hearing a little better. The one thing why I was listening to Jamie talk about the election by mail, that it might be worth us looking into. I don't know what the total cost is, but we might be able to use some of our pandemic money for voting machines and a few other things. So if the borough and everybody put in, then you get it funded and you're covered. But because that's certainly one of the reasons why we're moving forward. But with that, everybody have a good night, and I'll see you when I see you.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to work with each and every one of you, and thank you for the updates on this COVID event and how our city has managed that. And thank you, Ms. Hines, for the insight that you shared about the different voting opportunities that we have. So I will see y'all all of a sudden. Y'all take care.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I guess I've been in touch with a lot of businesses this week. One that owns a pretty popular flying business. Yesterday, he sent $50,000 back in refunds to people that had put down payments on hunts, flyaway hunts, and he's not alone. Restaurant, bar owners, hotels, everything. If we don't get this 14-day quarantine thing changed, we're going to have a lot of businesses that are not going to make it, a lot more than our major airline. And the governor's said it's going until the 19th, and I just hope he sticks to his word on this one. We really need to think about it. Just because they're opening at 25% isn't working. And I know tomorrow there's part of phase 2. There's rumors it's going to be 50%. But guys, our town's in bad shape. We got 95 people infected and 700,000 that aren't. And right now we're quarantining the wrong people. I don't know. I don't want to get crazy, but it's not good. And I appreciate the meeting. Jamie, I'm behind you 100%. I went to most of those voting meetings. Paul, Mayor Gabriel, you were there. To us, a lot of this will be repetitive. I think it's good education though for the public, but guys, our businesses are in trouble and it ain't opening up quick enough, but I guess we just got to stay tuned.
Thank you. And on a note, just to follow up on one of Councilmember Peterkin's comments, that Mr. Ostrander was actually the chair of that election stakeholders group. So I think most everybody was aware of it, but just wanted to throw that out there. So should have some pretty good insight when we have our work session for sure. Councilmember next.
I guess I'll start with mail-in elections. I guess change comes tough sometimes, and it may be the way to do it as we move forward, and I'll look forward to more. It's kind of a patriotic thing for me. It's kind of like doing the pledge at the beginning of the meeting. You know, it's something I feel good doing, and doing it with others, and being seen doing it, and seeing them do it. And that's how I feel when I get in line to go vote. And when I leave and I get the little I voted, I keep that on for a couple of days until it flies away, I suppose. And it'll be a part of life if we go that way that I'll definitely miss. So regarding our local businesses, I hear what Robert's saying, and I'm seeing it. And the restaurants were at 25%, and they're going to go to 50% here this Friday, according to the governor. And I have done my part to some degree. I mean, I think that part of our society, our civilization really is having those kind of places and that you can go to and have choices. And so I've made the reservations, and I've gone to 3 restaurants this last week, which is unusual for me to go out that much. But in this particular case, I feel kind of the need, and it's not been like an issue, like you're going into a crowded room or something, what somebody might be imagining. You go in and went to Paradises first, and I think there was one other couple in the building, and they were in the other half of the building, and we were up front, and so it was rather quiet. There were people coming and going that were taking takeout and whatnot. But I guess long and short of it, I'm just encouraging folks to go out and indulge in what we do have out there, and kind of help try to keep our economy going. If all of us do that, I think it'll help us move forward. And the last thing I like to say is I like to thank the mayor, Mayor Gabriel, for his leadership in that memo to the council, the commissions and committees that he submitted about a week ago. And it not only thanked them for their services and all that, it explained kind of what the city was doing and in our administration, and also how meetings might be held for them moving forward. A lot of them weren't necessarily getting all that information here. It was all in one memo, and I think that it was well received. I got a few calls regarding that from some of the committee members, and they certainly appreciated it. So thank you, Mr. Gabriel, for doing that. That's
well, thanks for I'd also like to do a shout out to you and Vice Mayor Malloy for your help on that, also getting that out, and the clerk. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Henry. Oh, okay. So
that was done.
Okay, yeah, again, thank you for your help on that. Appreciate it. And with that, seeing no other business before this body, we are adjourned.